Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year. But the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And you're listening to the Abortion Diary podcast. These are the stories we share.
I suppose I'll find out, or I'll give a bit of background. I was young. I can't remember the exact age. I think it was 27, which doesn't sound too young, but might have been 25. I was a single parent of a 3 or 4 year old boy. I had been suffering from postnatal depression and anxiety and all of the things that went with it, and I struggled for the 4 years that he was alive. But I have to say, I was always a very good mum to him, and he is an absolute credit to me today. But I was doing my access course. It's sort of equivalent to an entry to university, and I was doing my exams at the end of it, and so that was June time, and I was about to start university in the September, which was a big dream, because obviously it was about 10 years too late, because I had messed up and didn't do it properly, as they say. And I was doing my exams, and I kind of realised that my period should have appeared, and I put it to the back of my mind and finished my exams and did really well in them, thanks very much, but was devastated, absolutely devastated to discover that I was pregnant. I had no partner. It was the result of a drunken accident, it has to be said. I feel, that possibly on the scale that people give, justifiable abortions, maybe mine wasn't justifiable to them, but it really was justifiable to me, because I didn't think that I would cope. I just could not cope. For 3 or 4 years, I had struggled by myself to look after my son and put every ounce of energy that I had into him, and to find that I was going to not be able to go to university, not be able to start on the long slog of trying to become a professional person who could spend money and be able to afford things in life. I wanted to give my living, breathing son a life, and I knew that I would just go through the worst of the depression again. So in Northern Ireland, as you know, unfortunately, we're not allowed to have abortions over here. You have to be in a very dire state of affairs before you can have one. I do believe I was in a dire state of affairs, but our assembly is a different story. So I was in bits and pieces, and I was like a broken woman. Thankfully, a friend of mine was able to give me the money, so I knew that I was going to be able to get an abortion. But it was very difficult to try and organise that. I would send my child to nursery in the morning. I didn't have a house phone, so I had no way of ringing the helpers or the advice lines that were available. I had to go and borrow a friend's phone, and then I got in touch with Murray Stopes or BPass over in England, I can't remember which. And I can remember they told me that I very definitely needed to find out exactly how pregnant I was, which meant going to the hospital to get a scan. When I went to the hospital to get a scan, it was a really terrible experience, because I knew that I was just newly pregnant. So when we got to the hospital, there was a male doctor, and 2 students, and they kept scanning my belly. And while my son was sitting there, because I had no childcare for him, they kept telling me, "We can't see baby, we can't see baby. Oh no, we can't see baby." And they knew exactly why I was there. And they knew that I was there, and I had explained to them, and it was just sickening. And they said they needed to give me an internal scan. And I said under no circumstances. They were already mistreating me and making me feel like crap. So I just said no, thank you very much, and I left. And I just went home and told a porky pie and lied to, I don't know if it was Murray Stopes or BPass that I went to. I said I'm very definitely 5 weeks, very definitely. So the next thing was, my appointment could not be until I was at least 9 weeks, because I didn't have enough money to go and stay over in England, because if you stay over in England, you can have is it a medical abortion? I think it's a medical abortion where you take the pills. So because I couldn't stay overnight and have 2 doctor's appointments, I had to wait until the embryo was big enough. Those 4 weeks were hell. I was ill. I was trying to cope with my child. I was just carrying this massive weight, but knowing that it was going to come to an end. But it was just unbelievably awful for 4 weeks. They felt like 4 years. When I eventually did go over, and I have to say, it was again because I was able to borrow £800 from a friend, and that's not including the flights. It was £700 and something that I handed over in a bundle in the waiting area to the receptionist, which was a very odd transaction, and it didn't feel good. Anyway, back to the start. I went that morning for the flight, and it was absolute nightmare trying to get all of my, my son looked after for the day, telling lies to people where you were going to be. I ended up having to tell my brother and sister-in-law, who I was very close with, that I was going for a procedure to burn what was it called? Had an erosion on my cervix. I actually did have an erosion on my cervix, but I had to tell lies to my family and friends. Anyway, arrive at the airport, in the waiting area, in the lounge, waiting to be called, and a woman from my hometown, a few years younger than me, arrives. "Oh, Rosa, how are you? Nice to see you. Where are you going?" Oh my God. And I had to, "I'm going for an interview." She was also going for an interview. For an hour on the plane, I had to pretend that I was going for an interview. I couldn't have thanked karma enough that she wasn't on the same flight home as me. It was awful. Anyway, got to Liverpool, and from arriving at the door, other than paying, I have to say I was given a wonderful service. The people there were fantastic. It was no big deal. I was in and out. I wasn't upset. I wasn't regretting it. I wasn't in tears. It was a necessary thing that had to be done. And it was okay. It would have been okay if it had been in Belfast. It wasn't okay because it was in Liverpool. So anyway, flying home was pretty bad. You can imagine feeling woozy, feeling unwell, feeling tired, feeling hungry. You hadn't eaten all day beforehand. It was a pretty nasty experience. I would say, trying to sit on that airplane was pretty miserable on the way home. And, I forgot to tell you. I knew I would forget to tell you. In the 4 weeks that I had to wait, I tried all sorts of things to try and save me the expense, the energy and the time. And I ate a serious amount of vitamin C tablets. I Googled, for the life of me, and I had, was it Devil's Claw? I was taking potions and concoctions, and I was doing all sorts of things to try and induce my own miscarriage termination, because the whole thing was just an ordeal that was going to be too big and too hard and too difficult for me. But apparently all of the vitamin C in the world wasn't going to work. Neither was the Devil's Claw or whatever it was. So anyway, back home after I'd had the abortion, and I have to say, I have never regretted it. I have never needed counselling. I have never needed help or support or love from any of those awful people that we have in Northern Ireland. I was able to come back, and after a few days, I was able to start to rebuild my life again. And I went on to university, and I went on to have a profession. I qualified, and my son now has a reasonably better quality of life than he would have had if I had to go through with that pregnancy. And I was able to continue and have a reasonably good life. And I now have a son who is small, and interestingly, I have suffered again with postnatal depression. I've friends and family around me that are able to support me, but I knew it wouldn't have been possible at the time. So that is my story.
Can you tell me a little bit about what the experience was at the clinic and with the procedure?
The experience at the clinic, well, I'll be honest with you, the one thing that really freaked me out was I sat down for the little conversation with the doctor to tick the boxes and to make sure that 2 doctors had signed me off. And they told me they were going to give me what's it called? It goes in your bum. A suppository. An antibiotic suppository. And I nearly lost the plot because nobody had told me about that. You're not putting something in my bum. Anyway, the actual surgical procedure I was put under, I actually could see the woman in front of me. I was lying on a bed. I could see the woman lying on a bed in front of me. There was a woman lying on a bed behind me. It was like a conveyor belt. It was really weird. And the procedure, I was in and out in 5 minutes. And I don't know how they did it. I don't remember. They maybe told me at the time. They probably told me at the time, but I don't remember. And I was out and waking up in the waking up lounge, and it was over. That's all that I can remember. I had a general anaesthetic, but that was all.
Did you go to Liverpool and come back the same day?
Oh yes, I went and came back. I flew over at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I came home on a 5 o'clock plane. It was some ordeal. It really was.
How much did the procedure cost in total, including travel?
I can't remember exactly. It was a long time ago. The procedure, I can remember handing over £700 in bills, in cash. So with flights, they probably would have been another £100. So, and then something to eat at the airport, or drinks of water, or taxis. Actually, because I had to get a taxi from the airport, I would say in and around £1,000, which is a lot of money, isn't it? And, you know, I was sitting in the aftercare area with 6 girls from England who got it completely free because they lived there. And then I was in debt up to about £1,000.
You also said that you had to tell everyone around you lies.
Yes.
Have you been able to talk about it more openly after that?
Over the years, as I became more vocal about my opposition to our current laws, I did tell 1 or 2 people in my close family. After taking part in the X-File project, I did tell some of my friends, but realistically, no, it's not a known thing. I'm not going to tell people about this because, well, I want to. I want to be able to stand up and tell, because if 1 in 3 women have an abortion, then quite a lot of my friends have. It's not such a big deal, and we should be slightly less judgmental of each other about that. And I would like to be able to talk about it like as if it's a normal thing. When I met my partner, now ex-partner, when I met my partner, it was like a thing that I had to disclose once I was sure we were close enough, because if we wanted to have children, then that meant that, you know, every single time I meet a different midwife, which is often because you don't get the same one here, you have to go through, oh, what pregnancy is this? 3rd pregnancy, 2nd baby. And then they look at you, had a termination. So, you know, every single time, and, you know, it's fine whenever it's a good midwife, but sometimes it's like, So anyway, you have to disclose this information to your partner. Which is fine. I wouldn't be with someone if they thought badly of me because of it. But it's this horrible stigma that we have around it that makes it out to be a horrendous, awful thing that you did and you must be ashamed of it. But actually it's not. Because if I didn't do it, I would have been in a gutter. Yeah.
Why do you feel you had to hide it from your family?
Because we think it's a terrible thing. Northern Irish people think it's a terrible thing. There are so many loud and obnoxious and harassing pro-lifers. They're not pro-life, they're pro-birth and they're anti-choice, and they are harassing people as they walk down the street. All of Northern Ireland, even though the pro-choice people will say, oh yes, I'm pro-choice, but they still start to qualify whether an abortion was a justifiable one or not. And, you know, nowadays we're having all these debates and you see people jumping in against the pro-lifers, and these people are pro-choice, and they're saying, but imagine if it was a 13-year-old girl and she was pregnant because she had been raped. Doesn't that mean that we should be able to have, that girl should have an abortion? Yes, she should. But so should the 34-year-old that got drunk and forgot to put a condom on. So should the 26-year-old who was in a long-term relationship but doesn't feel she can follow through. Every single woman should be able to. And I had to hide it from my family because I didn't want them to see me as irresponsible. I didn't want them to see me as uncaring. I didn't want them to view me badly, which I maybe did not give them enough credit. But at that time, it's possible that I would have been viewed badly.
Do you think you'll ever tell them?
Some yes, others no. I think the others that I wouldn't tell, I think they probably know because I'm so vocal and going to protests and forever sharing abortion rights news on Facebook. Although, yeah, some know, some maybe, yes. Maybe, hopefully, it won't be important. Hopefully our laws will change and then I won't have to stand and shout and argue.
I wondered, how did it feel to not be able to have a support system throughout this experience because you couldn't tell people?
It was, I felt like a criminal because, especially because it took, over 4 weeks before I went from finding out I was pregnant to having the abortion. So I was hiding stuff all the time. And I just wasn't, and I was sick. I had morning sickness all the time and I was getting bigger and my boobs were enormous and smells were making me feel sick. And I probably hid. I probably hid and turned into a hermit for those 4 weeks. It felt awful. I came home that night and because I had used up all my friends' credits or whatever, I came home that night and I had been left a sweet and sour ready meal. And I put my child to bed. And so this is after the ordeal, after the flying and whatever. And put my child to bed and I sat on the sofa. And I was just totally by myself. And ate my sweet and sour ready meal by myself. It was really quite miserable. I would have liked to have somebody, but you couldn't reach out to, because like I say, my best friend had already taken me that morning to the airport. Somebody else had looked after my son for the day. There was nobody that I felt I could talk to or trust or ask to stay at their house or anything like that. It would have been good. It would have been helpful. Mm-hmm.
Have you felt like you've been able to have the space to process such a lonely experience?
I have begun to, because I have felt from that time and from shortly before it, I have felt very strongly about, women's rights and our lack of autonomy and, the lack of equality between women over in England and ourselves. We're supposed to be part of the UK. I have been banging on about this quite a lot. But actually, I've only really ever been able to like talk about this to like 3 people or 4 people. And recently I've been in touch with, some people, some wonderful activists here in Northern Ireland, and seeing them on TV and hearing them on the radio and talking to them and taking part in protests and being there and using my face and using my voice. It feels like now I am starting to say that was wrong. I shouldn't have been treated like that by my country. But I feel like I'm now standing in solidarity with other people that may or may not. It's none of my business, but they may or may not have been in the same shoes. So I feel now that I'm starting to process that. Yeah.
Why do you want to share your story?
I want to share my story because it's normal. And if I don't do it, somebody else might not. And it needs to be told. And we need to realise that it's a normal part of life. Something that really irritates me is that we think that abortion is this new, terrible, awful thing, but women have been using herbs and medicinal properties and things for millennia. They've been preventing pregnancies, and women have been taking care of this forever. And I want to stand up and say that I'm a woman. I had to do that. That's okay. I'm sharing my story because some other person might feel like it's not okay, and they might feel sad, and they shouldn't, because I'll be with them. I'll stand with them. Thank you to all the women who are standing with me, who are standing up for our rights, and who are sharing stories, and who are trekking around interesting countries and standing up and speaking for us. I want to say thank you to them because they're standing up for us.
As always, for more information about the Abortion Diary podcast, visit us on the web at theabortiondiary.com or email me with your questions or comments. If you would like to share your story, send me an email at melissa@theabortiondiary.com or visit our website, click on Share Your Abortion Story, and fill out our contact form. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to help us reach more folks, please subscribe on iTunes and write a review or rate this podcast. Your reviews and ratings will help us grow in the iTunes rankings and reach more people. I would also love to hear from you. You can also follow The Abortion Diary on Twitter or Facebook. And The Abortion Diary can't continue without your support. Support The Abortion Diary by making a tax-deductible donation to us on Fractured Atlas, or buying some of our wristbands or totes on Store Envy. And a special thanks to you for listening. I'll be back next week with a new story.